Hello everyone, my name is John. Welcome back to the channel. Now, when we think of OSHA, we think it's this big bad government entity who has all the power. And so you would think that if they walked into a facility and they saw a piece of equipment, what would be deemed as a death trap, they could instantly shut that facility down until they get repaired, right? If you think that, you'd be thinking just like me, because that's what I would think. And just like me, you would be absolutely wrong. But it's not that you would be wrong about that assumption like me. It's why they wouldn't be able to shut that facility down until that piece of equipment got repaired. It's the why that's shocking. And we're going to find out why in this video. Between 2016 and 2020, American food processing workers suffered 126 amputations and 20 broken bones severe enough to require hospitalization. That's more than one worker losing fingers or hands every 2 weeks, according to federal workplace safety data. These numbers only represent the most severe injuries that employers are legally required to report to OSHA. The actual toll of workplace injuries is significantly higher. This is part of the human cost behind America's cheap processed food industry. Food processing is among America's most hazardous industries, where workers operate high-speed machinery designed to cut, grind, and slice thousands of pounds of meat per hour. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, food manufacturing had an injury rate of 4.8 cases per 100 full-time workers in 2021, higher than the average for all private industries. OSHA's Severe Injury Report documents that food manufacturing workers face amputation risks at rates exceeding many other industries. Federal law requires employers to report any amputation, hospitalization, or loss of an eye within 24 hours, but research suggests many employers fail to comply with this reporting requirement. The 126 amputations documented by OSHA between 2016 and 2020 represent cases severe enough that employers couldn't avoid reporting them. Studies indicate that workplace injury data often undercount the true number of incidents due to underreporting by employers and workers who fear retaliation. Food processing plants operate industrial equipment including bandsaws, meat grinders, conveyor systems, and slicing machinery. OSHA inspection reports consistently identify two primary causes of amputations in food processing. First, failure to implement lockout/tagout procedures. OSHA regulations require that equipment be de-energized and locked before workers perform maintenance or clear jams. However, investigations following amputation injuries frequently find that workers attempted to clear jammed equipment or perform maintenance while machinery remained energized. Second, inadequate machine guarding. OSHA's machine guarding standards require that hazardous moving parts be protected by guards that prevent worker contact. Inspection reports document cases where guards were missing, improperly designed, or removed to speed production. Worker advocates and OSHA inspectors report that production pressure contributes to these violations. Workers describe environments where maintaining production quotas creates pressure to bypass safety procedures. When machinery jams or malfunctions, stopping production to properly de-energize equipment takes time that impacts daily output targets. OSHA enforcement data reveals recurring patterns in food processing violations. Machine guarding violations consistently rank among OSHA's most frequently cited standards across all industries, and lockout/tagout violations are similarly prevalent. When OSHA investigates amputation incidents in food processing, inspectors typically find one or more of the following: machinery operating without proper guards, workers servicing energized equipment without lockout/tagout procedures, inadequate worker training on safety procedures, or documented pressure from supervisors to maintain production speed. These violations are not unique to specific companies. They appear across the food processing industry. Now, most people believe that if government inspectors found what is deemed a death trap piece of machinery in a facility, that they would be able to shut that facility down on the spot until they got that equipment repaired. That would be a myth. Under federal law, OSHA is stripped of its power to shut down facilities deemed immediately dangerous, except in very narrow, specific circumstances. Even when a company is hit with a citation for a missing safety guard, which if that was the case it would be done so that it can speed up productivity. These companies can contest that for months or even years. During that entire legal delay, that same piece of equipment is allowed to continue operations, not just in that facility, but in all the facilities that that company owns. And so the law doesn't stop operations, it just starts a clock. So federal officials or these inspectors can inform employers and employees of imminent danger and recommend citations, but they must petition a district court to obtain an injunction or temporary restraining order in order to stop operations. So OSHA officials cannot directly shut down a job site or a business. They must take it to court, and it is only through a court that they can shut down the operations. And again, we may be talking about months or even years. And so workers at these facilities are exposed to these dangers, and they are forced to work with this equipment while the legal battle plays out in court. And so you wonder why the amputations and the injuries to these workers are so high. So if this is all the power that the government have against these companies, what power does the employees who operate this equipment have? OSHA's Regional Emphasis Program for Food Manufacturing, established in 2018, specifically targets these persistent hazards due to their prevalence across the sector. The pattern suggests systemic issues rather than isolated incidents. When the same types of violations appear repeatedly across different facilities and companies, it indicates industry-wide practices that prioritize production efficiency over comprehensive safety implementation. OSHA's maximum penalties for serious safety violations are set by federal law and adjusted annually for inflation. As of 2024, maximum penalties are $16,131 per serious violation and up to $161,323 for willful or repeated violations. Critics of OSHA enforcement, including worker safety advocates and some members of Congress, argue that these penalties are insufficient to deter violations at large corporations. A company generating billions in annual revenue may view even maximum penalties as minor business expenses compared to the cost of comprehensive safety upgrades or slower production speeds. Workers' compensation insurance covers medical costs and lost wages when workers are injured, but economists note that these costs are predictable and can be budgeted as routine business expenses. In contrast, upgrading safety systems, adding personnel to reduce production pressure, or accepting slower throughput represents ongoing operational changes that directly impact profitability. This creates what safety experts describe as perverse incentives. In some economic analyses, accepting a certain level of injuries and paying associated costs may appear more financially advantageous than comprehensive prevention measures. According to the American Immigration Council and Bureau of Labor Statistics data, immigrants make up approximately 28.7% of all workers in the food processing industry nationwide. In some states, this percentage exceeds 40%. Research on workplace safety and immigrant workers documents that this population faces specific vulnerabilities. Workers with limited English proficiency may struggle with safety training. Those with uncertain immigration status may fear retaliation or deportation if they report. Safety concerns, economic vulnerability makes workers reluctant to refuse dangerous conditions or report violations. Academic studies and investigative journalism have documented that food processing facilities are often located in areas with limited employment options, creating workforces with few alternatives. This power imbalance affects workers' ability to negotiate for safer conditions or report violations without fear of consequences. Now, this is mind-blowing. So inside of mega food processors, there's a cold calculation known as perverse incentive. And so while a finger loss is a tragedy to a worker, to a billion-dollar corporation, the maximum OSHA penalty for a serious violation is just $16,131. Economists note that workers' compensation and safety fines are often budgeted as, get this, routine business expenses. In the boardrooms, it can be actually more financially advantageous to pay a predictable number of amputation than to slow down the production line to implement safety upgrades. And so the injury isn't a failure of the system. For these companies, it's just a line item budget. Could you imagine what these work environments would be like if penalties were painful? Imagine a $3 or $4 million penalty for an amputation plus an additional $10 million to the government for every single violation. Multiply that time hundreds of violations and you'd probably have a much safer environment for these workers. It's just my opinion. Labor rights organizations report that even workers with legal status face barriers to reporting injuries or safety violations due to concerns about job security, particularly in regions where food processing represents a primary employment source. OSHA operates with statutory limitations that affect its enforcement capacity. The agency cannot shut down facilities deemed immediately dangerous except in specific circumstances. Criminal prosecution under the OSH Act is limited to cases involving willful violations that result in worker death, and even then prosecutions are extremely rare. When OSHA issues citations, companies can contest them through an administrative review process that can take months or years. During this period, identical hazards may continue at other facilities operated by the same company. The legal process creates delays between violation identification and final enforcement. The OSH Act's penalty structure was established in 1970, and while penalties are adjusted for inflation, critics argue that the underlying maximums fail to keep pace with corporate revenues and the true cost of serious injuries. This has led to ongoing congressional debates about increasing OSHA's enforcement authority and penalty limits. Worker safety organizations document that the combination of limited penalties, lengthy appeals processes, and inability to impose criminal liability on corporate executives creates an enforcement environment where determined companies can treat violations as manageable business risks rather than existential threats. 126 workers lost fingers or hands between 2016 and 2020 in documented amputation incidents in food manufacturing. These injuries occurred in an industry that produces the inexpensive processed food filling America's grocery stores and fast food restaurants. The pattern of violations, inadequate machine guarding, failure to implement lockout/tagout, production pressure overriding safety procedures appears consistently across OSHA enforcement actions. This suggests systemic industry practices rather than isolated incidents. The workforce bearing these injury risks is disproportionately composed of immigrants and economically vulnerable workers with limited employment alternatives. The regulatory system's limited penalties and enforcement tools struggle to change industry-wide practices. Every time consumers purchase the cheapest available processed food, they participate in a supply chain where economic pressure flows down to production workers operating dangerous machinery under conditions that produce predictable, preventable amputations. So there you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like the video, share the video, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video.